Am I the a-hole for going to my dad's funeral against his widow's wishes? Am I the a-hole for not letting my daughter go to her homecoming dance? Am I the a-hole for calling my wife Patty in front of her family for putting her maiden name on our son's BC? Am I the a-hole for going to my dad's funeral against his widow's wishes? So I'm the product of an affair. My dad's wife forgave him for getting my mom pregnant on the condition that she and their kids never have to see me or hear about me, and he couldn't see my mom. Even so, my dad was involved in my life right up until he died, and we were very close. After he died, I contacted some of his family members, not his wife or kids, I didn't want to upset them, to ask if it would be okay for me to go to the funeral, and I just didn't get any replies. I ended up deciding that since I've never met his wife or kids or most of his family, they wouldn't even recognize me, so I could just quietly be at the back and not bother anyone. Turns out, his wife did recognize me. I don't know how, and she interrupted the service to drag me out of the building and yell at me for being there. And then, when I tried to leave, she followed me to my mom's car to yell at her. Now I'm embarrassed and guilty that I upset her and caused drama at the funeral and dragged my mom into it. My mom says I didn't do anything wrong because I couldn't have known my dad's wife would know what I look like. But I'm not sure if she's trying to make me feel better. I just wanted to say bye to my dad. I was trying to cause any trouble. Am I the a-hole?
When my husband of 27 years divorced me, he told me not to contact any member of his family. I abided by that until my darling Mill became ill, and it was obvious she would not recover. I went to her funeral uninvited and sat in the back where I wouldn't disturb the family and paid my respects to my MIL. I loved her dearly, and she was my mom for 27 years. No way was I going to miss saying goodbye. Family didn't like it, but I didn't care. I had just as much right to be there as any of them. My FIL is now not doing well, and when he passes I will go to his funeral whether I'm invited or not. My ex divorced me. The family did not. NTA. When my husband of 27 years divorced me, he told me not to contact any member of his family. I abided by that until my darling Mill became ill, and it was obvious she would not recover. I went to her funeral, uninvited, and sat in the back, where I wouldn't disturb the family, and paid my respects to my MIL. I loved her dearly, and she was my mom for 27 years. No way was I going to miss saying goodbye. Family didn't like it, but I didn't care. I had just as much right to be there as any of them. My FIL is now not doing well, and when he passes I will go to his funeral whether I'm invited or not. My ex divorced me. The family did not. NTA. I agree with Nah. Wow, that lady just lost her husband who mattered enough in her life to forgive him for cheating. Who was also probably in her life longer than the OP has been alive, so it makes perfect sense that she'd lose her composure. Since OP is young, they probably didn't know how to be present or show respect to their father in death, but showing up to a funeral alone with potentially hostile people was not the answer. I feel sorry for what happened to OP, and I also feel sorrow for the widow who had to see a painful living reminder of her dead husband's actions. OP is definitely allowed to grieve and feel pain, but the wife owes OP nothing, and she's allowed to be imperfectly human too. The funeral was arranged and paid for by his wife. Saying goodbye to him is something you could have done, and still can, in your own way. You can devise a memorial for him and be at that place. Consider him and what he enjoyed and let that suggest something. As a for instance, if he was active in his city, arrange to plant a tree in a public space there. Did he enjoy hiking absence with plaque along a favorite route? If he was fond of animals, do contribute something to a shelter that can be marked in memory of him. If it is important to you that other people know he was your dad and that you grieve for him, donating something in the community on which you can place a plaque in his memory with your name as contributor may give you that permanent sense of ownership in your dad. It can also be a place that you visit when you want to connect to your memories of him. Any of this can be your private and public acknowledgement of your relationship to your father without involving his other family members. When my husband died, his ex showed up and I kicked her out, but I did it in a very polite way in which I asked her to not come in again, and we hugged and she did not come back inside. But she is also an addict who got their son taken into foster care because of her neglect after she fled states away and cut contact with us. So yeah, at 27 I was left with the full responsibility of taking care of all the arrangements and paying for everything after being a stay-at-home mom for 3 years and no job. So sorry, I still got him the beautiful memorial and viewing he deserved. It wasn't optional, and no one was about to hijack the day from me while I'm grieving my husband dying in my arms and having our 1-year-old daughter in my arms for the funeral and my teen stepson also. But I tried my hardest for all his children to be involved. NTA, I feel for the wife, but you're an innocent party who did nothing wrong and deserved to say goodbye to your father. As long as you were respectful and kept your distance. My dad did the same thing to my mom and it absolutely destroyed my mother, but they stayed together, and when my dad died recently, my mom invited my half-brother, whom none of us had ever met, to not only attend the funeral and be a part of planning it, but she also invited him into my parents' home to say goodbye to our father, as my dad was on home hospice care the last few weeks of his life. It wasn't easy for my mom, but she was still able to muster up enough compassion for a young man who did nothing wrong, but be born into a complicated mess that was not his own making. So my mom swallowed her pride and had my dad's son openly acknowledged as his child at the funeral, despite the embarrassment she might have felt. If she could do all that, I'm sure this woman could have simply kept her distance and let you grieve your dad in peace. I'm sure your father's wife did some social media stalking to find out what you look like in the past, and that's how she recognized you. But she was the one who created the scene, not you. She could have spoken to you privately or just not said anything, assuming you weren't introducing yourself to random family members.
Am I the a-hole for not letting my daughter go to her homecoming dance? My daughter is 14 and a freshman in high school. She came home one day after being at her mother's for a week. We split custody and wrote homecoming on our calendar and starts talking about all the plans she's made with her best friend to go to the homecoming together. Homecoming week happened to fall on a week she was with me. She starts raving to my wife and I about the dress her mom took her to buy and that she's matching with her friend. She had even bought a ticket already. I was furious with her entitlement to just make all these plans without asking me first. I can admit it's not just her fault, but her mother's as well for not clearing it with me before buying her the dress and ticket. In fact, I wouldn't put it past her and her mother to have bought the dress and ticket before asking in order to force me into letting her go. I want to teach her a lesson about asking first and not assuming that I'm just going to let her do whatever she wants and that she can't manipulate people in order to get her way. So I told her that if she'd ask first, I'd have been happy to let her go to her homecoming dance. But since she decided to make plans and buy stuff before even asking if she could go, I wasn't going to let her. She cried and told me that you only get one freshman homecoming. And I told her maybe she should have thought about that. I said all homecomings are the same anyway. She has 3 more opportunities to go and she's not missing much. She sulked in her room for the rest of the day and didn't talk much. I tried to comfort her, but my wife said not to because I'd be teaching her that I'll give her my attention if she acts upset and cries. I went to comfort her anyway because I didn't think she was acting, but she rejected me. That infuriated me even more, so I left her in the room to cry alone. Her mother was furious when she found out and demanded that I pay her back the money she spent on the dress and homecoming ticket. I said absolutely not because she didn't clear it with me before buying those things, so it's her own fault. However, she contacted her attorney, who contacted mine, and long story short, I got to sit down with my wife and our family therapist for the painstaking conversation about communication. It's now long after homecoming and my daughter is pretty much back to normal, but she's still angry with me for not letting her go to that dance. I stand firmly by my decision not to let her go, but was I an a-hole?
Yeah, I thought maybe if it was just out of nowhere thing that she was just up and going without telling him or asking. But he straight up admits that it's BC, he wasn't in the original loop. He saw her excitement and ruined it. The new wife is also an AH because she's the one who pushed this. She probably egged him on and doesn't like the attention the daughter gets. The part where he said I tried to comfort her, but my wife said not to because I'd be teaching her that I'll give her my attention if she acts upset and cries. Huge red flags that she doesn't like his daughter, only he is too caught up in control that he ignores this. If I was the daughter, I would have gone to my mom's that specific week or day and gone to homecoming on her watch. Whatever trouble I'm getting in afterwards is fine with me because at least I went to the dance that I was excited about. YTAOP, and your daughter will always remember how you shut her down and belittled this experience. YTA. Your daughter is not a place to express your bruised ego of not being asked about it first. Because your daughter is supposed to calculate whose week it is of which your school event that had nothing to do with any of your schedule was going to be on. Honestly, your rant here sounds kind of psychotic. If you wanted to be in the loop because it's your week, you could raise it to her. Hey, you know how this works, I need to discuss with you in case I need to be on standby. Just because you guys divorced and now you're keeping power control scores does not mean she should skip school events. If it was about communication or mom trying to strong-arm him, he would have taken it up with his daughter's mom, not his daughter directly. I never get upset with my children when their dad makes the mistake of talking to them about vacation or outings that might happen on my time. I still let my kids go because they're clearly excited for it, but I've had to have a conversation with their dad to remind him he needs to clear it with me first before talking to the kids about it. Just in case I may already have something planned for that time, otherwise I would usually let my kids go as long as dad and I are able to work a way that I don't lose bonding time with my kids. It's honestly so easy to keep your kids out of your adult issues. OP/YTA. If he can't make that up to her, that's a full-on lost cause. Just based on OP's description, we can tell how excited the daughter was to attend homecoming. There were so many other things OP could have done to make the situation a teachable moment besides being completely unreasonable and overbearing. He could have called his ex-wife up and communicated how he felt he was being manipulated and didn't appreciate it. He could have told the daughter he understands she is excited, but in the future, if she wants to attend an event during OP's scheduled visits, he would like them to talk it out and plan in advance so he doesn't miss out on time with her. Anything but what happened. The poor daughter not only had a dream snatched away, but then she had to hear everyone talk about the party she missed and see the photos and videos on social media. The worst part in my mind is that OP didn't even replace homecoming with a fun father-daughter activity. He ruined her freshman experience and then basically said tough shit and left the poor girl to be distraught because his wife said so. Shame on you both. Absolutely this. OP, you are actively driving your 14-year-old daughter away. She is not 4. She is 14. As a mom to a daughter pretty close to your daughter's age, after a year with global stuff like we had last year, I would jump for joy if my daughter got to be a normal teen at this point. Every bit of normal that she gets to have after losing so much last year is something to be celebrated. You made something that was totally about your daughter's coming of age, about you and your precious pride. What possible good reason could you have had for her not attending her school dance? You also missed a golden opportunity to bond with your daughter. It was your weekend. You could have offered your house for the girls to get ready. You could have offered to drive them to and from. Do you have any idea how much you can learn about your child while serving as a chauffeur while they and their friend chat in the back seat? Dude, man up and be the father your daughter deserves.
Am I the a-hole for calling my wife Patty in front of her family for putting her maiden name on our son's BC? I've been married to my wife for 3 years. I have a 16-year-old son from my previous marriage, and his grandparents and I are on good terms. We've set up a joint account to contribute towards his college fund. The problem started when my wife requested that I pull money from my son's college fund to pay for a C-section in a private hospital. I declined her request and refused to even negotiate. She complained about how I didn't seem to care about her or our son's well-being, even though there was nothing to worry about in terms of health. Yes, every medical procedure has its own risks, but the local FRER hospitals we have are decent and offer great care. All family members and friends had their kids there. She disagreed and criticized the poor service local hospitals have and insisted that this was a big deal, since it concerned both her and our son's health. I tried assuring her, saying she will be fine, but she argued that I have no idea what it's like and told me if I refuse to put money towards the CSE, then I shouldn't be surprised when she put her maiden name on our son's BC instead of my family's name. I refused as I saw no need to waste money on private hospital when we had free service and care available. She stopped bringing it up, and days later she had a scheduled CS at a local hospital and I wasn't allowed to be at the hospital, and I respected her wish. I only saw my son when she came home and I was shocked to learn she went ahead and put her maiden name on the BC. I immediately went off on her, but she said I caused this and claimed I was obviously favoring my oldest over my youngest before he was even born. I said she was dead wrong and called her petty and vengeful for doing this purely to punish me solely for the fact that I wasn't able to afford a private hospital. Her family watched and she told me to step out of the room, but I said we weren't finished talking. She started crying, and her mom got involved and told me to step out because I was stressing her daughter out. I had an argument with her too and asked if she approves of any part of her daughter's behavior, and she just shook her head telling me to calm down and give her some time to rest. She said no, but I bear blame too for disregarding my wife's needs after she made them clear and pointed out that pulling some money for the private hospital wouldn't hurt. But my parents disagreed and are pissed and refusing to even visit, calling my wife unhinged and toxic.
Seriously. We only get his perspective, so of course he's going to put himself in the best light and make her sound bad. But if she doesn't want to see him for days after the birth, there's probably a good reason. It sounds to me like this marriage is over. And there's no reason the kid should have his name. He didn't spend 9 months growing it. The idea that the name should come from the parent who did such a small amount of the work is outdated and a vestige of a time when women were property. If she wanted to switch hospitals last minute, she may have found out something about her pregnancy or another woman's experience that triggered the change. Some women do elect to have C-sections ahead of time, but that's often because their previous births were an emergency C-section, and sometimes those tear during vaginal birth. If she hasn't had children before, that's less likely to be a reason. But he doesn't seem to have had a rational conversation about this, just stomped his foot and said no. And while he might not have wanted to touch that particular set of money, it should have been a discussion on why she wanted the private hospital, not just a blanket no. I sort of agree, but in truth more info is needed. The line I liked the least was where he said he refused to negotiate after he, rightly, said he wouldn't pull money from his son's college account. But I wonder a few things. What is the reason for the C-section? Is it elective or is the OP requiring it for health reasons? How is the medical system set up? In some countries private hospitals really do provide better care and have better resources, but in some countries there really isn't much difference in outcomes between the two, it's more about poshness and the extra stuff. When I was in medical school, some of the doctors I rotated with worked in the public hospital in the morning and the private hospital in the afternoon. Many people in that country didn't bother with paying extra for private, except the really rich, because it wasn't necessary. So I feel like if it's an elective C-section, not medically necessary, in a country that has good public hospitals, then I would lean more towards the wife being at fault here. But if it was medically necessary in a country with poor public hospitals, then the husband is more at fault. But either way, I don't like people who use their children to hurt their spouse, so that bothers me. But nor do I like men who insist everyone in their house has to have their last name. So maybe I'm an ESA. 100% all of this. She was wrong for asking for money from his son's college funds, and he was wrong for dismissing her completely when she asked about having the C-section at a private hospital. He could have tried to discuss it properly with her to find out why exactly she thought a private hospital would be better than whatever public hospital they had chosen in the first place, and from there discussed other ways in which they could pay for her to go to a private hospital. Instead he tells her no and then leaves it at that. Then he decides that it's a wonderful time to get on her in front of their family after she's just come out of a C-section and is in the process of recovery.